Hello, welcome to Mechanicsburg Mystery Presents a Conversation with Andrea J. Johnson. Andrea is a speaker, editor, book coach, and the author of the Victoria Justice Mysteries about a trial stenographer turned amateur sleuth. She holds an MFA in writing popular fiction from Seton Hill University and a copy editing certification from the University of California at San Diego. Do you still teach creative writing, by the way?
I do. At the
Okay.
University of Maryland Eastern Shore, yes.
Okay, I should have clarified that before we begin. And her essays on craft, on the writing craft, have appeared in Crime Reads, Mystery Scene, and the Romance Writers Report. She is also the author of 3 books on how to craft a killer mystery, on writing detective fiction, writing dialogue, and mastering the art of suspense. So, Andrea, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah. I have read the second book in your series, Deceptive Justice, and I want to ask about your setting because my wife grew up in Camden, Wyoming, Delaware, and we visited the beach. And of course, every time I talk to her about it, she says, "Oh, I say, oh yeah, this is kind of like Ocean City," and she says, "Bill, Ocean City's in Maryland." So, tell me a little bit about where you set your story and what is that inspired on one of the particular Delaware coast, not Maryland, Delaware coast towns?
Yes, actually, it is. It's a bit of a mashup. The story is set in Bickerton, Delaware, and that's a fictional town. So I have a fictional county in which it is in, which is Trident County. But the town is a mashup of Georgetown, Delaware, because the town layout actually mimics Georgetown, but its location is Bethany Beach, technically, but when I do talk about the beach locations, it more mimics the layout of Rehoboth Beach because Bethany Beach doesn't have a boardwalk, but Rehoboth Beach does, although the actual area that the stories are set in is the Delaware Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. So that's technically Bethany Beach. So it's a conglomeration of a lot of things, but that all comes down to my experience as working as a court stenographer in Georgetown, Delaware, which is very close to the coast. It's just not as close as the book would suggest.
Okay, so do you have like a map of like the Georgetown area so that you have modified for your story purposes?
Yes, exactly. I have redrawn in my own hand the town center of Georgetown, but I've changed the streets and sort of cut them off so that they immediately almost kind of hit the beach.
Right.
So that's how I came up with the setting because I wanted to honor the location of Delaware. There are so many things that are unique to that area that aren't quite southern, that aren't quite northern, but are wholly eastern shore that really I wanted to highlight. So I didn't want to get stuck to be landlocked, as
Mhm.
Georgetown, Delaware definitely is. But I also didn't want to lose what I knew would be a location that I could recreate faithfully and actually have some true life bits that I'm putting in there to help the stories feel more realistic. So I didn't want to lose that either. So I just decided to do a mashup when it came to the location.
Yeah. Can you remind me? And I'm actually kind of going away from the book for a moment, but did you grow up in the area? You grew up in Delmarva?
I did. So it's funny. That's why I laughed so hard when you said Ocean City is in Maryland. I actually grew up in Maryland near Ocean City. So when you say something like that, she's absolutely right. It's in Maryland. It's close, like in the grand scheme of things, but it is not close in terms of like locals getting in their car, like trying to go from Ocean City to Bethany or Ocean City to Rehoboth. That's almost an hour drive because of the way the roads are set up. So it's close, but it's not close, but we consider it all the Eastern Shore. So, yes, I did grow up in Maryland on the Eastern Shore.
Yeah. So you bring a lot of personal memories, a lot of personal experiences into your books just by way of growing up in this area. Not that these are biographies, obviously, because I like the realism of it, in other words. And that's what goes on here. And of course, it's not a legal thriller like in the same way as an Earl Stanley Gardner, where it's a lot of courtroom maneuvering. You're having to deal with the law, however, because of course there's right and wrong, and your characters are flawed, which is again another reason I like your series. You have a state trooper, for example, and he's gotten into trouble. I won't I'm going to shy away from spoilers, obviously, but there are some people they do have light and dark in them, and these are your regular cast members as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, and I thought that was important again to give this sort of a reflection more of modern times, but also to make it feel relatable to people. We often read stories that have Mary Sue's, those perfect characters, and they feel distancing. And I really wanted this to be something that people felt comfortable with and wanted to return to for exactly what you said, because it feels a little bit more real.
yeah. Can
So I
you
appreciate all that.
yes, okay, can you describe Victoria to us for readers? What is she like? How old is she?
Well, she starts off at 25. In the second book, I don't think I necessarily give her a specific age, but she's clearly almost a year older because almost a year has passed since the first book. But because she's younger than most of the characters she's dealing with, she's often considered by those around her as being naive. And she's also very quiet because that's the nature of her profession. As a court reporter, you sit and you listen, you try to be seen but not heard. And so a good bit of the first book is her kind of overcoming that label and finding her own voice. And in the second book, it's more about, okay, using that voice to actually deliver the justice that the books are using as the constant for their titles.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, on your website, you have a quote, guaranteed to renew your faith in justice.
Yes,
And
yes,
that sounds like it applies. That's your brand for the books. That's how you describe
yes.
the books in short. She also has kind of a fraught relationship with her mother or her adoptive mother. You want to go into that a little bit?
Yes, yes. So Victoria is adopted, and she was adopted as a baby, and she was adopted from someone who had a drug addiction. But she was adopted by a woman who's much older, a woman who decided not to have children, but as she got more mature, she wanted to have that family aspect. And so she loves Victoria more than anything. She is the quintessential helicopter parent, and she is in Victoria's business constantly. And Victoria actually lives with her during those first couple of books. So the friction is meant to help Victoria in some ways solve the mysteries, but also to help Victoria find her own voice because she needs to separate herself from that mother who is so domineering, but domineering in the best way. Like
Yeah.
there's love between them. And that's actually one of the undercurrents and subplots of both books, this idea of love.
Hmm. And her mother is also kind of in the power structure, the local power structure as well, and that provides an interesting source of conflict as well.
Yes, you're good. You've done a lot of research. I really
I've read the
appreciate
book.
that.
I've read the book.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes. Yes, there's a trajectory, just like there's a trajectory for Victoria to grow as a person, her mother grows as a person. We initially meet her mother, and she's a retired educator who has aspirations to be the town mayor. And as that ambition grows, so does the friction between the two of them.
Yeah. So it's in a way, it's a small town mystery, except that it has thriller elements to it. It's definitely thriller. I mean, I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that a car bomb goes off in the early in the second book,
Yes,
and
that's
that
on
has
the
all
back cover.
kinds of
No
it's
spoilers.
on the cover. So if it's on the cover, we could talk about it. um, how it what inspired well to you, because you mentioned how do you go from growing up in Delaware to you end up in California learning how to be a transcriptionist, court stenographer, and how do you make that leap from there to writing mysteries?
Okay. Well,
It's
this is a little bit wild. My initial life ambition was to be an actress. So that's why I was in California, and that was going quite well. But unfortunately, I had some illness in my family, and I knew that I had to go back home, or maybe I didn't necessarily have to, but as the devoted daughter that I was, I knew that I wanted to, and I wanted to be there, but I also knew that I wanted to be able to have my own life. So I went into court stenography because I had heard from a friend that it is a great way to make a lot of money with, and I mean nothing by this, but with very little education, right? It's a very specific skill set. You don't have to go to college for it. You just learn the skill set and then you're off and running. There's no hierarchy in terms of trying to climb a ladder to get a certain salary. If you can do it, then you can get paid well. And so that was my situation. I was like, I knew I have to go back east, but if I go back east, I want to be able to have a career. So I'm going to learn how to do this. And I learned a profession, and then I came back. And after everything was sort of settled with my family, I was like, well, this was great in terms of like doing something different and learning about the law and seeing some very interesting things because I was working in Delaware, which at the time that I worked there, it was a death penalty state. So I was getting all kinds of very interesting cases. But I don't know that I necessarily want to do this anymore because it's not where my wheelhouse is. My wheelhouse is about creativity. How can I still be creative here on the East Coast?
Yeah.
But like the prime has passed in terms of me being an actress because now 10 years has passed and I'm not, the ingenue. What do I do? And so I turned to writing and I found it to be very connective in terms of making that transition because as a stenographer, you have to learn a lot about language, intonation, what people mean, grammar, spelling. As I had just mentioned, I was seeing all kinds of very interesting things, and I started to think, hey, what if you have this court stenographer who's seeing this, seeing the injustices in it, and tries to right those wrongs? Now, my stories do kind of deviate from that basic premise, but that's kind of how I felt comfortable turning a life experience into a mystery, but also more to the point of your question, I transitioned from that profession to writing. I already had the skill set in terms of sentence structure and stories and conflict. It was just a matter of finding the time to sit down and create something new.
Hmm. And for Victoria, and it's kind of it's coincidental. I actually have a book. This guy wrote this massive book called Shift Happens, and it's about keyboards. And they actually have a chapter in there on court transcriptionists and what the box looks like and what it actually comes out, the 2.5 inch wide piece of paper. And of course, now
Yeah.
they have computers to kind of help with the process. So like you with other women I've known, they get specialized in like one particular field that is absolutely critical. There's someone I know who knows government import and export regulations, and she's the consultant that they have to pay good money to because she knows this. Just like yourself, you know how to operate the box, and that's very important because an accurate transcript is absolutely vital to serve the interests of justice. And were anything from your court experience made it into the books yet?
Oh, yes, many, many things. I've done pretty much what if scenarios for each of the main mysteries of the book. That's why, in a way, there's the courtroom mystery, or rather the courtroom case, but then the mystery that spawns from it. So, in the first book, that moment where, well, I'm not giving this away, this is on the back of the book as well, but there
Okay.
is a moment where everyone in the courtroom expects the officer to open a package and reveal some drugs that were confiscated at the scene. And instead, what he opened up was a pack of confectionery sugar.
Mhm.
That actually happened. Now, it didn't happen in my courtroom, but it is something that actually happened in Delaware. Officer was sitting on the stand, was expected to do that, and there wasn't sugar in there, but the drugs weren't there. And so I started to say, well, ooh, what could come from that? What if? What happened? Now, I do know the truth of that case, but I made my own sort of scenario and ending around it. And
Right.
that is essentially what prompted the idea for the first book, that just one idea, that one scene.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So as Victoria goes through these books, of course, she's having to deal with romantic interests as well. Um, I, I don't know from the first book, but I assume is that going to play more of a role in subsequent stories in what you're
Yes.
reading, what the reader can expect now?
Yes, yes, the romance that happens between the two characters, and I won't say who they are because that will allow a
Don't want to
um,
spoil it.
little bit of joy. I mean, it's hinted at the on the back of both books, but a little bit of joy for readers who look for that. That relationship will continue through subsequent books and
Mhm.
advance in the same way as, dare I say it, but that's kind of how I envision it. So I might as well. Donna Andrews' series, how her main character eventually falls in love, gets married. There's a whole book where they're on a cruise ship for a honeymoon and all that. So expect things like that to
Yeah.
happen.
Okay, as long as it's not like one for the money, two for the show, that
Oh,
particular author, she.
where they're just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. No, no, no. This will be a progression because, as far as I'm concerned, they're working toward being a team. You
Yeah.
know, cozies are all about the community and a group of people working together. And I do want to keep that aspect. I mean, there's so many things in my books that diverge from the typical cozy. I do want to keep that because that allows the audience to play along. And that's really what most cozy readers want. So I want to satisfy that urge.
Yeah. Well, and there's something about the dynamics between a couple that really I think is something that could be explored in a mystery more often because it's usually just the lone wolf, the lone detective, or the woman who has the romance problems and doesn't commit to anyone. But when you have two people there bouncing off of each other, you get a more dynamic energy, I think, in a story. And I'm thinking like the Dorothy Sayers and Lord Peter Wimsey and Harriet Vane, when they're together, it really doesn't matter what they're doing. You're just listening to them talk piffle to each other. So, were you still planning on writing like a dozen books? I understand that like a jury.
You are pretending you didn't do research. You did do research. There's only one or two places where I've said that. So you have done research. I that was my intention when I was young and ambitious and um, closer to my experience as a court reporter. Many, many moons has passed. And so I don't know that I'll necessarily go to 12, but I do expect the series to be significant enough that it's a true definition of a series. You know how they say, well, 3 books is a trilogy, but when you get to 4, you get to 5 to 6, that's an actual series. So
Yeah.
somewhere
Okay.
around 6, not a jury at this point. I don't think I have this book ambition, but that
Well,
was
you
something I
you take
said.
it one book at a time. You can't think about that, otherwise you're just going to get brain freeze and just like, no, I can't do this. But you take it a chapter at a time. You take it a story at a time. And I could see, I guess, Victoria doing appearing in short stories as well because you have so many story seeds from your experiences. Is there something that you haven't that you can't use, for example, that you encountered in court and you said, "Oh, that's so good," but oh no, that's that's wrong.
Wally,
Or can anything be turned into a story? I mean, that might be the case as well.
well, I think to some degree the teacher in me, because you mentioned that I teach, the teacher in me would say that yeah, almost any idea can be turned into a story. But you did bring up a good point earlier that there is a lot of sort of blood and violence on the page, and that's kind of where the line needs to be drawn for me and the personal experiences. Because as I said, I did work in the court systems when Delaware was a death penalty state. I don't think that it is anymore, but um, I did get some really grisly cases, like ones that involved super mega violence. And although those are interesting, it's like, oh my gosh, I could see so many places where that could go. I don't know if it would work with this series. It may work creating a different type of series that is wholly and truly a thriller. And maybe that's in my future on the horizon. Who knows? But
Mm, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So when you're writing, and this actually came from a discussion I had with my wife who took up writing late because she actually turned to me one day and she said, "Bill, do your characters talk to you?" And I say, "No, I wish they would. I have to beat it out of them." He said, "They talk to me all the time. They tell me what they want to do and where they go." And it's like, I had never heard of that. Have you?
I've heard many writers say that, and it hasn't happened with me, but I do have something that happens with me that's adjacent. And it just may be, again, because I have a theater background and that was my original aspiration. As I am going through the book and I'm reading things or I'm creating a scene, especially if the characterization is working really well or I'm feeling it really strong, I hear how they sound. And so,
Oh.
because I can hear how they sound, the clarity and how they look and move becomes really sharp to me. And the cadence of the words, I often hear it in a sense of musicality. And, part of that may be I did audiobooks for a long time too. So I'm maybe thinking ahead to what the audiobook sounds like. And so how people speak it naturally as opposed to how we read things on the page is always kind of in the back of my mind.
Hmm.
But that's what I encounter more than them actually speaking to me. It's more about how they sound when they do speak, when I give them the words, how it flows.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When since you're drawing from your personal experience as a transcriptionist and all that, do you still find the need to do certain research in your books?
Yes, I find that uh, more and more I need to do research because that technology is changing. So I have to make sure that I'm staying current with that technology. But
Oh.
also, since some of what I'm doing does intertwine with the law, I need to also make sure that I'm talking about court procedures in the right way. Because, yes, I remember certain things about how we did things, but I was in a superior court, which is different from circuit court, which is different from chancery court, which is different from justice of the peace court. So I need to be very conscious about being clear which procedures I'm dealing with, make sure I'm dealing with them correctly, and make sure
Right.
the audience knows that it's this kind of court and that's why we're doing these particular things.
Okay. Okay. I guess I also can get into your teaching. Are you doing private coaching with writers as well? Are you doing
Yeah,
independent? Okay.
yes.
So what kind of coaching? What kind of yeah, I mean, I saw there was a phrase on your, I think it was your website, cozy mystery coach. And how does that work?
Well, I work mostly as a developmental coach for people, helping them create their story ideas, first and foremost, keeping them motivated in terms of writing regularly and getting their the manuscript if they're plotting it out for, okay, I only have a certain amount of time to write per day. I hope to have this done in 6 months. Then I help them with creating a schedule to make sure that they're getting through act one by 6 weeks in, and then
Hmm.
act two, et cetera, and so forth. But I also give them feedback in terms of whether the story is actually developing in a way where the audience can play along. Because as I mentioned before, that's the key component to a cozy, right? We can layer other stuff on top of it in terms of, as I've done, the sort of thriller aspect or the legal aspect, or making it more cultural based. There's a lot of really, because most cozies are usually like a drawing room in a castle off somewhere. We're getting a lot more cultural specific cozies. Like you can layer those things on top, but at the end of the day, it is all about the audience being able to play along and laying out the clues. So I help people with that as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see how difficult that can be. I've done writing myself, although I've never published a novel, but I understand a little better just how much detail you need to put in every scene because you do need to describe things and you do need to have your characters developed fully. And it can get exhausting sometimes. It's just like how much, no wonder you can want to have like a similar room every time so that you can just go back to that and you don't have to describe it all over again. How much teaching do you do at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore? How many is there multiple classes or is there a single one?
I have about four classes that I teach.
Oh my
Two of
gosh.
them are creative writing, and two of them are African American literature.
Hmm.
But yeah, and those in the creative writing classes, in those I actually try to give my students a full overview of what writing is. I don't just focus on fiction for them. I focus on small aspects of drama, like writing a monologue. I
Mm.
also teach them a little bit of poetry, and then we spend most of the time, since that's my forte, on writing specifically commercial fiction so that we can practice writing dialogue and showing rather than telling and creating a compelling conflict that's going to keep the audience engaged and hooking the audience from the very start and making sure that we are constantly foreshadowing anything that's going to um, help us understand that big surprise or twist ending that you're going to create. So
Hmm.
I try to give them a little bit of everything. But with my coaching people, I specifically want them to be doing either a traditional mystery or a cozy so that I can really hone in on those aspects for them and I help them develop their novels specifically. I don't necessarily work with short story writers. So, you
Yeah.
know, if anyone's interested in that, make sure you have a novel on tap.
Hmm. As someone with a copy editing certification, I want to know if, because I was a newspaper copy editor for a long time, when you're reading a book, are you critiquing it as well? Do you have a little red pencil so you see split infinitives or incorrect bad tenses? I am terrible on tenses. My wife has to correct me on getting the tense correct in a sentence.
Well, actually, no. When I'm reading, I really do enjoy the immersion of it because I'm a
Oh,
like visual learner. So visual learner, performer, creative person. So as soon as I start reading something, I am zoned out. I don't hear the people who are going around and noise around me, and I'm just visualizing the scene. It's like I'm watching a movie when I read a book. So usually no, but my dear poor students, even though I tell them, I'm just going to look at the content of what you're doing and see if this is a great idea, just like you said, they're not used to writing, and so they switch tenses in the middle, like they're starting in present tense, and then by the end of the story, everything's in past tense, and that kind of drives me crazy because I have to take my pen off the page and not correct that kind of thing because I know that they are at the beginning of their journey. So there, yes,
hmm,
reading, no.
yeah. That's actually good because it really spoils it in order if you're trying to just to read a book to relax, not to be engaged that technical about the writing. You just want to enjoy the there have been times I've actually kind of overdosed on reading and I thought I need to go back to a familiar book just to make sure that yes, I have not spoiled myself. Is there some mystery books recently that you'd like to mention, something that you thought really or even a favorite that you would return to? This is always a way I love asking people about what else are you reading lately? I want to know what's a good book I can read.
Actually, I haven't been reading any mysteries lately because October was I'm going to date myself. October was sort of the anniversary for Back to the Future Day, and the
Yeah.
40th anniversary of it. So I've kind of been reading all kinds of stuff about Back to the Future. Most recently, Michael J. Fox's memoir on his time in that movie. So
Oh,
I don't have
wow.
anything current that I'm reading, but
Yeah.
I will say one book that has always inspired me, and I think it is an excellent book in terms of being a cozy, but kind of feeling like a modern cozy because the protagonist is so she's amateur sleuth, but she's also very determined and self-assured, and the story itself subverts all kinds of tropes or cliches. Is Kate Carlisle's Homicide and Hardcover. Now she's written several books in that series since then. That's the first, but I just keep going back and back to that book because I think it is such a wonderful read and it has inspired me in so many ways. And that's one of the things that I think I should have said when you asked me the question about when I read, do I see in copy editing terms? No, because I'm a young writer in the grand scheme of things. And so when I read, I'm learning so much. I'm impressed at the way that they did that, or, oh my goodness, that's a great word to describe 10 things at once. And so I'm just learning so much and I'm so giddy in that process that, um, that doesn't come into my mind when I read. But
Mm.
long answer, Kate Carlisle, Homicide and Hardcover.
Oh, that's good. Okay, I noted that down. As a matter of fact, you mentioned Back to the Future. There's an obscure, it's only an ebook. It's by a fellow named Ryan North, just like the direction.
Mm.
And he's gone on to write some really interesting books, some nonfiction books. But this was something, it was a collection of Tumblr posts he had because he came across the novelization of the first movie. And it is absolute bonkers because the writer had the writer, unfortunately, maybe this is ageism, but he's an old guy, so he's trying to describe teen behavior using essentially old guy words. And it was based on on what was kind of the initial script. He didn't have the finished script, so it was the initial version, which apparently takes place. It opens in a classroom with students watching an atomic demolition. And apparently, this was at the time when, instead of doing the 88 miles in the DeLorean, it was supposed to be a nuke that they would have to be powered by in order to get back.
Yes,
And
yes.
he broke it down. He was going page by page through this, and if he maybe it might still be available on Kindle, and it was cheap. It was a couple of bucks, but it is absolutely hilarious because he's breaking down each page of the book. And this is apparently the author was an old guy who had done previous novelizations, and unfortunately, shortly thereafter, he died of a bee sting. So he never got around to doing books 2 and 3. Just it's really a weirdy book. It would have fit perfectly. I go back and reread it every once in a while just because it's just so bonkers. Not only the book itself, the description of it, but Ryan's reaction to it. So there's a little something to put in your folder for next year when you go Back to the Future. And I've seen the trilogy. My wife and I saw the trilogy again recently, and it's really wonderful how well it holds together. It really
Yeah.
is great. I hope they never remake that.
Wow.
So, what are you working on number 3 in the Victoria Justice series?
Yes, I am working on number three. It should be out sometime next year. And I say sometime because there was a little hiccup with me and sort of an accident I had that kind of put things on hold there for a little while. But I think we're still a go for next year. So I'll be putting out that news soon.
Well, that's good. And I hope, I don't know anything for sure, but I hope Deb invites you back. Maybe this time take a safer route, and I'll be able to see number 3 in the series. All right.
Yes, yes, I appreciate that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And just a reminder to readers, book 1 is Poetic Justice, book 2 is Deceptive Justice, and they're available at the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop. And Andrea, if readers want to learn more about your characters in your books, where can they find it online?
Well, my website is ajvnovelist.com, and you can find me on social media. That's Instagram, Blue Sky, X if you're on there, and as well as Facebook and Pinterest at AJ the Novelist. So easy.
That's great. That's great. And Andrea, thank you so much for appearing with us today and talking about Victoria and the books and about some other things as well. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. And I should have given you a compliment at the beginning. You're a gracious host, and I love the sound of your voice. This
Oh,
is the perfect meeting for you. You sound fantastic.
that's great because I don't hear that, believe me. So I really appreciate that very much so. And this is Bill Peschel for Mechanicsburg Mystery Presents. And I hope that your favorite book is the one you're reading now. Thank you so much for visiting, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye. Mechanicsburg Mystery Presents is sponsored by the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. To learn more about the store, visit the website at www.mysterybooksonline.com. And thank you for listening.